Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Very, very excited to be back again for Women in Rabbinic Narrative and Law. I forget where Rabbinic goes, but we're doing both law and narrative in a Rabbinic context. So we are definitely doing both, and it's been wonderful. Without further ado, please, Dr. Schick.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. It's really good to see you all tonight, and I'm excited to learn together. I thought we would do one thing, but I was just thinking that there's going to be a source sheet. I just thought, it's in light of, we've had someone in this class who's recently given birth, and I think it would be really nice to look at one more text together, which deals with now the aggadic descriptions of conception, gestation, and a birth. I think we can have a really meaningful discussion around that too. So what we're going to see tonight is how, what we've seen thus far is that the Eretz Yisrael texts have a much more inclusive view with regard to women and halacha than does the Bavli text that we have seen. That's really been the theme so far. And last week we saw a little bit how through the use of narrative, the Bavli evinces awareness of the Eretz Yisrael positions and perhaps even raised challenges to its own exclusionary viewpoint. So we're going to delve into that more today and see how through a wholly aggadic text, the Bavli actually reinstates female agency, where a parallel Eretz Yisrael text marginalizes it and removes it all together. And that is in aggadic texts, which describe the process of gestation and conception. So this is found, we're going to a new text that we haven't learned before. It's a work of aggadic midrash called Vayikra Rabbah. Let me just share at least some of the sources I will share right now. And what Vayikra Rabbah is, so everyone is, I'm sure many people have heard of Midrash Rabbah. Now the thing is that what it's kind of today become a whole collection, Midrash Rabbah. All the 5 books have their own Midrash Rabbah on it. And it looks like they were all like kind of written together. So that's actually not so. Each of them actually are their own book or work that was written on its own. And the earliest of them are Bereshit Rabbah and Vayikra Rabbah, and they were written during the Amoraic period, meaning they're not from the time of the Mishnah. I mean, we've seen works of Midrash from the time of the Mishnah. Those are the works of Midrash Halacha, which those are written on all the books of the Torah except for Bereshit, whereas this is now a homiletic Midrash, really. And where they differ is that Midrash Halacha is really a running commentary that follows the order of the Pesukim, of the verses. And the running commentary is the laws that are derived from the verses following the order. And I mean, following its order, again, as a running commentary. Homiletic Midrash is usually on the beginning of the Parsha, or more accurately, the Sidra, because the Sidra, the Parsha is what we read in the annual reading of the Torah. We read the whole Torah in 1 year, and that is divided up into Parshiot. During this period in Eretz Yisrael, it seems that they read the Torah over a 3-year cycle, and it wasn't divided up into a Parshiot, thereby completing the Torah in 1 year. It's actually divided. These are called a Sidra. A Sidra is the division whereby the Torah is read over a 3-year cycle in a day. Yeah, so they did not have Simchat Torah every year. So what the works of homiletic midrash often are is it'll take a verse from the beginning of either the Sidra or the Parsha, and it takes that verse as a jumping off point for then a series of homilies and discussions. And some say, just to give you a sense of what it is, that some theorize that these may have been the homilies that were the shul sermons. So that just, and not everyone agrees with that, but that just tells you a little bit of what they are. So it's not going in like a commentary, it's a whole discourse where the jumping off point is a biblical verse, but then it goes off on a very different discussion, making connections to other verses from all over the Tanakh, often from Ketuvim, from writings, and going off on a discourse that really has like very little to do with the actual content of the Pesukim. So Vayikra Rabbah, it is one of the earlier Amoraic Midrashic. It's one of the earlier Midrashic collections, being from the Amoraic period. So dated somewhere between the mid-4th and 5th centuries. And again, it's from Eretz Yisrael, because in Bavli, there's only one text, and that's the Bavli. So whereas in Eretz Yisrael, they have discrete works for different genres. So there's the Yerushalmi, which stays close to the Mishnah, but there's also works of Midrash Halacha. There's works of Midrash aggadic. They have a separate works, whereas everything is put together in the Bavli. And we're going to see that a passage from Vayikra Rabbah, which it's on the beginning of Vayikra Parshat Tazria, Isha Ki Tazria, which the biblical verses are solely concerned with the ritual status of a new mother. That's what the verses are about. But in Vayikra Rabbah, it uses that as a jumping off point to have an extensive discussion about birth, the relationship between the mother and fetus, the process of gestation, and theories of embryogenesis. And we'll see that Bavli Mida actually contains many of the traditions from this Vayikra Rabbah passage. It's Parsha Yud Adalad 14. It's on Vayikra Yud Bet 12:2. Isha Ki Tazria, when a woman conceives. However, we're going to see that while in Vayikra Rabbah's description, the mother is really absent. The father is described as the source of the fetus's material subsistence, and the process even depicted as this dangerous time for the fetus. And it's God who makes this fetus take shape from the father's seed. So we're going to see that the Bavli Asugya, while it does contain the Vayikra Rabbah traditions, it also contains traditions which diverge significantly and depict the mother as actively contributing to the material existence of the fetus, and even offers this very idyllic image of the womb. Probably something that a lot of people have heard before, a very famous tradition. So let's get to it. And through it, we can just think about the irony, because the last 2 weeks we learned that it is Eretz Yisrael texts which obligate women in the command to procreate and say men and women have this equal obligation, whereas it's the Bavli who says, women are not obligated in Peru. It's only the man's job. And yet now we're seeing in the homiletic or the Midrashic discussion of it, it's the opposite. It's the Bavli saying, no, the mother does have a part in the creation or the gestation of a fetus. Okay, so let's start with, we'll look at Vayikra Rabbah. There's really a lot to say. You have the Vayikra Rabbah sources in front of you. It's long, so, it's hard to go through the entire thing. But what I'll do is I'll try to go through some of the highlights of it. Okay, so as I noted, so Vayikra Rabbah 14 is a homily on Vayikra Yud Bet, which is 12:2, which begins with Isha Ki Tazria, which literally might mean when a woman gives forth seed. but it's generally, that may be an idiomatic way of describing when a woman conceives. And again, the verse opens a discussion concerning the legal implications of a new mother's ritual in purity. But in Vayikra Rabbah, this is used as a way to engage in a lengthy discussion of conception, fetal development, and childbirth. So I will open the sources that you all have in front of you. Go. Okay, so let me just share that with you so you can all just read along a little bit. Yes, I'm going to share it right now. Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay. So let's start. So it begins with Petichta 4:1, which compares childbirth and God's creation of the first man. And therefore, it grants the former like a real cosmological significance. Okay, so that's 14:1, and that's what it's divided up into these short little sections. Okay, but now, so we begin here in 14:2. Okay, and in 14:2, it focuses on the praise owed to God and God's care of the fetus. And it cites Rabbi Levi, who is a third generation Amora from Eretz Yisrael. And just, in a general, there's no Babylonian sages that appear in Vayikra Rabbah. So when we talk about Vayikra Rabbah, we're only talking about Amoraim, sages from Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbi Levi offers 3 parables to illustrate God's care in forming the fetus. So he says here, Rabbi Levi said 3 parables. In everyday living, we'll read in English, I guess that's easier. If a man entrusts another man to guard an ounce of silver in private, and the latter returns to him a liter of gold in public, would not the former be grateful to his friend? So is it with the Holy One, whom human beings entrust him with a drop of the whitest fluid in a private. I'll read that in Hebrew, tipa shalab lanit b'chashai, a drop of white. What's that? A drop of white? It's clearly referring to semen. Because Baruch Hu machzir lahem nefashot shleimot, and God returns fully formed and perfected human beings, and b'farhesia, in a public, be'ein zeh shavach, is it's not worthy of praise. And this is, and then he's citing, this is where it brings this verse from Eov, from the book of Job. Then Rabbi Levi gives another a parable in B here. Rabbi Omar, so when a person in everyday life, when a person is locked in a prison, no one pays attention to him. Then someone comes and lights him a candle. In a machzik lo tova, wouldn't the prisoner be so grateful for this? So similarly, the fetus, it is placed. What's the translation? It's dwells in its mother's womb. And God gives it a light, as it says, and this is what Husha Eov Amar now brings a verse from Elo, when his lamp shone over my head when I walked in the dark by its light. The Ein Zeh Shavach, is this not worthy of praise? And then in C, Rabbi Levi gives another parable. Again, a person's, in regular life, if someone's locked in a prison, and no one pays any attention to him. And then what happens, and someone comes along and releases him, and takes him out of there. So isn't he going to be ungrateful to him? Again, similarly, the fetus dwells in its mother's womb. Because God releases the fetus. But God takes him out of there. Ooh, and now it goes back to Vayikra Rabbah, and this is going to be a refrain that ends each section. Ubioter in Haya Zachar. And all the more so if he's a boy, because that's its way of segueing back to the verse that this section is on. Isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar, a woman who gives birth, who conceives and gives birth to a boy. So each of the petichto, each of the numbered sections ends with that refrain of, all the more so if it's a boy as a segue back to the opening verse. So we see these three parables cited by Rabbi Levi, who illustrates God's role in conception, pregnancy, and birth. And we see, the only physical contribution here is the man's whitish drop of fluid, and the mother's body is really, like, how would you describe the mother's body? It's being compared to a prison where he's locked inside, and it's dark and it's scary, and it's only God's kindness that releases it, that gives it light. And all more so, it's like this baby the fetus would fall out if it weren't for God watching over it. So it's, the mother's body is we're not up to that one yet. Sorry, his is saying, it's just a drop, and God turned it into a fully formed person. We're going to get to the further dangers of the womb. Okay, we now, that is mentioned in Petichta Gimel, the third, little set of homilies here, also beginning with a verse from Eo, who we have next, another Amora, Rebbe Abba ben Kahan, who's also a third generation Amora, who presents another series of three statements where God is presented as the protector of the fetus from the forces of nature that are inherent in the body of the mother that threatens its existence. So let's read this together. So Rabbi Abba bar Kana Amar Tzla, he said three things. Rabbi Abba bar Kana Amar b'nehek sheba olam. So in normal life, it is a custom of the world that if a person holds a bag of money and turns the opening, the yitain piha lamata, and he turns the opening downward, ein hamaot mitpazrot. So wouldn't the coins scatter? So similarly, the fetus dwells in its mother's womb. The womb is an upside down sack, basically. And it's God who guards it so it doesn't fall out and die. Is this not the life and the kindness that is mentioned in the verse from Job that opens this section? And in B, it similarly says, again, in like regular customs of the world, so it is custom of the world that a beast walks with its body in a horizontal position. That's the way animals walk. And the fetus is placed within the beast's womb. It's like in the form of a covered wagon. So animals walk horizontally. The fetus is safe. But the human or women, they walk upright. And the fetus is in her womb. And again, it's only because of God who's making sure that the fetus does not come out. So again, the womb we see is depicted as just posing a threat to the fetus. Depicted it's like a vessel open at its bottom, in which God ensures that it won't fall out. In the next, next it talks about the female body, the sense of wonder that it's only due to God's grace that milk comes from the breast on a human as opposed to the udders in an animal. In the same section, number 2 here, we find another statement, which again meditates on just the inherent dangers of the womb. Rebbe Elazar, Amar Rebbe Elazar, Im Yisha Adam b'kamin sha'achat eno meit. If a man were to stay in an oven for an hour, wouldn't he die? Ume'er shalisha mirotchim. The fetus, the womb of the mother is boiling. And the fetus is in her womb. And God ensures that it won't be these three terms, a sandal, a shaliyah, a shafir. These are all the different terms used in the Mishnah to describe an aborted or miscarried fetus. So it's only due to God's care that the fetus, is not a membranous bag or a placenta or a sandal-like bag, meaning that it's not aborted and that it's not, boiled to death in the hot, fiery place that is the womb. We then have a statement by, so Rabbi Elazar, he's a third generation Amora. We then have another statement by another third generation Amora, Reb Tachalifa from Caesarea, Amar Tachalifa from Caesarea. Im achal adam prusa, achar prusa. If a person eats, like a piece of bread, meaning a portion after another, meaning they eat a lot. Lo shnia dochet harishona. Wouldn't the second push out the first? And the pregnant woman, she eats a ton. How much does she drink? She drinks so much. And amazingly, the food and the drink that she consumes doesn't push out the baby, meaning once again, God ensures that the fetus is not expelled. And finally, we have, skip one, we have another statement, we'll skip a little bit, by Rebbe Meir, who is a famous Tana, third generation Tana, who to describe how God provides for the child even after birth by describing a process which was actually a theory that was maintained by the Greeks, which is, so Amar Rebbe Meir, Kol tisha chodshim she'enei sharu adam, badin hu shetei ro'ah. Now, all 9 months, a woman does not see blood, means she doesn't get her period. Sorry, it's off down here. And really, she should see blood. Why did she not get her period? Ma Kadosh Baruch Hu says, so what does God do? Why doesn't a woman get her period while she's pregnant? So, misalko lemalan midideha. So God actually directs the blood upwards to her breast. Voseh oto chalav. And God transforms her menstrual blood into milk. Kedei shetzei hablad yellow mazon le'achal. So that fetus will come forth and have food to eat. And then again, coming back to its refrain, which makes no sense. And all the more so if it's a boy. Coming back to our opening verse, Isha ki tazriya v'yalda zachar. So God provides for the child by suspending the natural flow of menstrual blood and transforming it into milk. And this was a widely held view in Greco-Roman thought. It's found in Hippocratic texts, and Aristotle, Soranus, it's held by a Galen as well. And just to why would you think menstrual blood becomes breast milk? So just pre-microscope, science is based on what one observes in the natural world. So what do they observe? Oh, when a woman's nursing, often, of course not always the case nowadays, but often she doesn't get her period. Well, if A equals B and B equals C, if she's not getting her period, but she is getting a breast milk, that must be where it comes from. So very kind of a cause and effect kind of a view of the world, but based on what they can see. Now, when we go to Petichta Daled 4, it continues to depict God's ongoing protection of the fetus until our birth. And it does so by using a string of architectural and nautical metaphors, which all again stem from a verse from Eo, from Job 38:8, which is Vayasach b'dlatayim yam b'kicho merechem yatsa, who closed the sea behind doors when it gushed forth out of the womb. So we will we'll talk more about this a little bit, but so I'll read this a little bit here. So it compares like various aspects of birth and labor to parts of a house and a ship. So right, just like there's doors to a house, there's doors to a woman. So that's an A here. Rabbi Shua Amar, just like there are keys to a house, so there are keys to a woman. That's B. Okay, and then Rabbi Akiva, and he brings a verse to prove it. Rabbi Akiva, just like woman has sirim. Sirim means, so there are hinges. But that's also the word that we use for labor pain. So there's hinges, there's sirim for a house, and there are sirim, same word meaning pains, labor pains for a woman. And for that it brings a verse from Shmuel Aleph, which I actually studied with my 10-year-old daughter yesterday for her Shmuel Aleph test. The wife of Pinchas, which she hears he died, and the Aaron was taken during the war with the Plishtim. It says, she bent down and she gave birth because the pains of labor came upon her. So it just continues to go through these parallels. And this verse from Eob, which talks about the sea, one is I clothed in the clouds, that's the amniotic sac. Swallowed in the dense clouds, that's the placenta. When I made breakers, meaning God sets limits to the sea, these are the 9 months of pregnancy, and set up bars, these are the first 3 months. And doors, meaning this verse describes how God sets limits on the ocean so it doesn't overtake the world, but it becomes a verse which is understood to talk about different aspects of labor. And we're going to come back to this. Okay, we're going to come back to it. Okay, now when we move on to Petichta Hey, that begins with another verse from Ketuvim, now from Tehillim, the Psalms. Indeed, I was born with iniquity, with sin, my mother conceived me. And so, being that Tehillim is a tribute to David, King David. So here, this verse is described as David, King David, talking about his parents and engaging in non-procreative intercourse, which wasn't a good thing. He's talking, he's not talking about it in a positive light. Okay, so that is what is described here by Reb Acha, who's also third generation Amora. And he uses this verse to associate marital intercourse based only on lust with God's, a kindness in intervening to cause a child to be born. So it writes right here, Amar David lefnei Kadosh Baruch Hu. So number 2, David said before God, my father didn't intend to create me at all. He only intended to fulfill his own needs. Okay, and know this. Okay, why when they took care of their needs, meaning he's saying when his parents had intercourse, this one turned his head to here, and the other turned his head in the other direction. And yet, ata machnis kotipa v'tipa sheyeshbo. And yet you gathered up every drop. And again, it's making reference to, it seems pretty clear talking about human, meaning even though they're in attention's word to conceive a child, God is good, and God took the seed to create the child. Then moving on to Petichta 6, we have a debate or discussion between Rabbi Yochanan, who we met last week. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Napacha. He's the one who in the Bavli was trying to say he held that women are not obligated to prove revu. So a discussion between him and his contemporary Reish Lakish. They have a discussion about how God creates the embryo from the father's seed, and they draw analogy from the process of winnowing to describe, again, God's intimate involvement in forming a fetus from, it says right here, from the whitest drop. So Rabbi Yochanan Omer, here, number 1 here, Eina Kadosh Baruch Hu tsar et ha'adam ela mitipa shalal vinut shabo. God only creates or draws a man from the drop of the whitest that there is. So again, making clear reference to the father's seed. Okay. So now the final petichta, let's see, I didn't put it here. Where is it? Let's see, we get a few elsewhere. It's actually not so that's all the petichta. Then it gets the petichtot, they're the opening kind of proems that opens up each a section of Vayikra Rabbah. And then it gets to the gufa, which is known as the main body, which is very short. I mean, the gufa is only around, it's 1 or 2 passages. Let me find where it is. And here it actually does have a bit of a shift. I'm trying to find it here. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Well, I'll bring it. I only have English here, so let me bring it in the English. Well, let me try finding it. So I'll read it to you outside. And what it says is, says that God directly is involved in sex determination, granting a couple a male child if, this is the last period. So if the couple observes the laws of family purity, they'll have a child. So that's 14:6. Then in the 2 gufa passages, which is the main body, it's actually a shift occurs, and God is barely mentioned at all. And what it actually says is here. I will paste it in right now in English. Where's the share? Yeah, here we go. So in the final passage, it says, here, I'll put it right here. Kufa, so this is the final. Under all circumstances, a male child is from the woman, min ha'isha, and a female from the man, ha'ish. And then this is followed by a set of biblical proof, a text to support this claim, which is followed by 2 parables. Now, while that does seem like this is saying women are involved in attributing to the development of the fetus, note that this makes no explicit mention of how the parents materially contribute to the fetus. And this becomes very apparent when we see this parallel tradition in Bavli. And it's very possible that what this means is male child is from the woman, a female from the father, meaning like how we attribute their lineage. because in the verses it brings, that's what it does. It's, daughters are named for their fathers and sons are named for their mothers. And even if it is referencing a material contribution, it still doesn't say so explicitly. So nothing in Vayikra Rabbah makes any explicit mention of seed or any material substance on the part of the mother. And the final passage, Vayikra Rabbah, concludes with a debate between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel regarding the changes in the order in which a fetus is formed during the Messianic era. And it shifts back to the issue of conception, and it uses an analogy to curdling milk, turning milk into cheese, to describe how God forms a fetus by placing the white semen into menstrual blood. And so menstrual blood is likened to milk, and the semen is likened to the enzyme, the curdling agent. So here we have our one only mention of mother's material contribution. And then it turns to the order of fetal formation, with a statement attributed to Rabbi Abahu, who describes God's kindness towards birthing women in forming the soft tissues of the fetus before the bones and all the hard parts of it, and thereby minimizing the danger to her. And it concludes with a statement which looks to Messianic times, which is that is a pattern in homiletic midrash, and says that in Messianic times, women will no longer give birth in pain. So as opposed to the petichtot that viewed the mother's body as a threat to the fetus, the mother is finally presented as an actor and engaged in the childbirth, though albeit she's still the subject of God's interventions. Now, what's very clear, and as many scholars have observed, what we have described here in Vayikra Rabbah as the seed, as the fetus being formed solely from the male seed, that reflects what's called, I'll put it in here, one seed theory. It's a one seed theory that was really promoted and maintained by Soranus of Epiphanes. He was a Greek, contemporary, actually from the time of the Greco-Roman, contemporary from the time of the Tanaim. And what he asserted is that in a one seed theory, it's just like what it sounds like. Only the men produce seed, and the woman's body is like the ground. The seed is planted into her body, where the seed then develops into a fetus, and she's really just like a passive object. Like I know she's like a hot house that houses the growing fetus. Now, this was a theory. It was far from the dominant one during the classical period, for a very clear reason of, well, he ran into a bit of a problem, which is, why do children not always look like their fathers? Children often look like their mothers as well. I think my kids all look like me, but, so he had a problem with that. He really couldn't explain it. And much more accepted were two-seed theories, which were common to the Hippocratic and Galenic, discussed by Galen, gynecological traditions, which they posited two-seed theories, which means that both men and women produce seed, which together forms the embryo. But it's very clear that what does underlie most of Vayikra Rabbah, it seems, it is depicting a one seed theory, and it's depiction of the whitest of white drops. God forms that white a drop, and the question is, why would it espouse the less popular one seed theory in light of when there was more accepted two seed theories? And in fact, we look into many Second Temple texts which talk about this, espouse a two seed theory, when this discussion comes up. So first, we can just, there's certainly, even if it wasn't the more popular scientific theory, this kind of tone and attitude is consistent with a tone we find, with attitudes we find in Greek literature. So the story of, just going back to the story of Pandora, we all know the famous story of Pandora, where she, opens the box and unleashes everything like evil in this world is due to her. And in Hesiod, he similarly disavows women's role in procreation. And something which is a similar description to what we find of Yekaraba's comparison to the fetus as one confined in jail to whom no one pays attention to. It corresponds, I'd say, Apollo's defense of Orestes for killing his own mother, Clytemnestra, as we find as told by Aeschylus in the Orestes. So at Orestes' trial, Apollo argues this following: the mother, make it bigger, is no parent of that which is called her child, but only nurse of the new planted seed that grows. The parent is he who mounts. A stranger, she preserves a stranger's seed, if no God interfere. There can be a father without any mother. I'm not sure how he figures, but okay, that's So Apollo justifies Orestes' acts in killing his mother on the grounds that a mother isn't really a parent because she's not active in the process of procreation, therefore not a true a parent. As we saw in Vayikarabba, father is regarded as the lone source of seed, the sole parent, and the mother is a stranger. And also in his comparing the mother to soil in which a seed is planted and preserved as it grows, that echoes what we saw in 14:4, where she's depicted as a vessel that houses the male seed until it develops into a child. There is still, though, one thematic element in Vayikarabba which is puzzling, and that which we don't find any parallel in a Greco-Roman text, and that is the detailed depictions of God's role in the conception and care of the fetus. And Vayikarabba is really characterized by two sides to it. One is, that it's only the man who gives material contribution, but it's also just throughout these really detailed descriptions of God's care. It's very intimate intervention of God, who's described as constantly active in the processes of conception, gestation, and birth. And this wouldn't, exactly a one seed theory doesn't explain this either. What's really interesting, and I've written about this, is that really fascinating parallels to the description of God in Vayikarabba is actually found in ancient Near Eastern texts from Mesopotamian and Sumerian texts which depict birth goddesses. Now, there are birth goddesses in a Greco-Roman mythology, but their job is causing pain to mothers or preventing them. They in no way are described as intimately caring for the fetus the way Vayikarabba does, but we do have very, very similar depictions in Sumero-Akkadian mythological and cultic texts. So, so we have one Sumerian temple hymn that describes the goddess Gatamdag as bringing the semen to the womb. And then where other goddesses can attribute to the developing fetus's growth and nourishment and birth. In another Sumerian hymn, do I have this here? No, okay, we'll see this one soon. We have the goddess Nisaba is accredited as placing the quote good semen in the womb. You enlarge the birthling in the womb. Another Sumerian mythical tale depicts the mother goddess Nin-Ator as shaping and fashioning the child in a utero, which really, these really echo the depictions of Vayikra, as we saw before, where it says human beings in trust God with a drop of the whitest fluid in a private, and God returns them fully formed and perfected human beings in a public. We have another Sumerian temple hymn which describes Nintur as the mother mistress of creating, who performs her task in the belly, the place of darkness. And we have several such texts which describe various goddesses, mother and birth goddesses as doing the work, where in the dark womb. It describes sitting in a darkness, seeing light only upon a birth. Now, another common element is that blend of architectural and nautical metaphors describing the female body and a birth. So we saw before, that verse from Job was used to, which describes parts of the house and sea to as parables for different, parts of the woman's body during a birth. Now we have similar imagery is found in an Assyrian compendium called Incantation of Asaluhi, Secret of Eridu. It says, may the ship arrive well, and our taut mooring rope be slackened, and our closed door be open. Just to really show this to you together, I'm just gonna go back to this. Again, remember we saw before, just as the doors to a house, there are doors to a woman. So her doors be closed. May forth come soon and see the sunlight. Again, that idea of it's seeing the light upon a birth, like rainfall from heaven, may it not turn back. Like what has fallen from a wall, may it not return. Like streaming a gutter, may its waters not stay behind. When Asalui heard this, he became anxious, he worried for her life. The word of E, he exalted his name. He threw the incantation of life, the formula of well-being. He loosened the mooring rope. He untied her knot. The closed doors were open. The seals were eased. The creature came forth. The separate bone, the human form. May it come forth and see the sunlight. Yes, Jennifer, you have a question.
Oh, thank you. I just find you absolutely fascinating. So thank you. I had to join a little late today. My apologies. I wondered what language, I have a few other questions, but those I can hold off. What language is this most recent incantation that you just read from?
This is written in Old Babylonian.
Okay.
These are so ancient. These way
before then. Yes.
Way
before. Okay, thank you. Let me. I don't want to interrupt.
No, and I'm glad you asked. That's a good point. So we have other Syrian and ancient texts which talk about again birth and the mother's body kind of being compared to a locked door. Now, of course, childbirth is a very dangerous thing. But the way it's described in the set of a text, it's described in very similar ways that we don't see in other texts, that we don't see in other places. So, yes, these are very old texts. These ancient Near East way predates the rabbinic period. However, it seems that many scholars have pointed to the fact that residues of ancient Mesopotamian religions did continue to remain a part of the common culture of the Middle East, even during the time. Even this is, we're talking about Vayikra Rabbah, Talmudic literatures from late antiquity. So it is possible that these kind of imagery, these kind of, I'm not saying that text, but these motifs, imageries, metaphors, still remained in the Middle Eastern imagination in some way. And scholars, by the way, non-Jewish scholars have discussed extensive Mesopotamian influence on the Greek religion and mythology, particularly in older works of Hesiod and the Homeric hymns. But that can continue to permeate ancient Rome as well. So what we see then in Vayikra Rabbah, these depictions, what we see is it's not that God is replacing the mother, but rather the God of Israel is replacing the birth goddesses and ascribing their roles to the God of Israel. And this does comport, this, by the way, it is a trend that male gods took over a role in the Greek and Roman pantheon. Male gods took over the roles of female goddesses. But nevertheless, the role of the goddesses, the unique role of a birth goddesses in shaping a child and assisting a birth, that actually was never displaced in the Mesopotamian pantheon. And it was always the mother, a goddess, who she had that role of being the one who forms a people. And we already see in the Torah throughout Tanakh, the God of Israel in a biblical text is associated with female birth deities, but we really see it's given its full expression here. Yes, I have a question.
Hey, question. Sorry, and I'm holding off on any other questions. When did the Babylonian the Mesopotamian, we'll say, incantations, when and where would they recite these? Were these at the birthing place, or were these in public, as of just to remind everyone what's really going on? Or
that's a really good point. They may have been done in like a temple and rituals, but that's a good point. I'm not sure, and that'd be really cool to know. Like, was it done when the woman's giving a birth in the temple? I'm not sure. That's an excellent question. So yeah, I really am interested to know. Okay, now, so that's by Vayikra Rabbah. So really, in stark contrast, what we saw of the halacha, we spent so much time showing how Eretz Yisrael halacha, includes women in the command to procreate. These men and women have an equal obligation in procreation and pruvu. We saw the tov septa, everything the man's obligated, the woman's obligated. There's no difference between the two of them. Women have, or can sue for divorce. Neither can take sterilizing potion, all that stuff. But in this aggadic text, we see women are really largely sidelined as having very little role in the actual physical act. Yeah. Now, when we turn to the Bavli, we see something very different. Well, we see something different occur. Now, the Bavli does contain, I'll start from the beginning, many of the traditions that are in Vayikra Rabbah. Here we go. Many of the traditions. So let's start. So here I have it in English as well here. It begins with a famous tradition But it begins with a tradition by Reb Simla, who we also saw in Vayikra Rabbah. In Vayikra Rabbah, here I'm just going to go to the English. He describes how a mother sits in its mother's womb. It says it's placed like we didn't read this, but this is in Vayikra 14:8. How does the fetus dwell on his mother's innards? It's placed like a folded writing tablet. Its head is between his knees. 2 hands are on its 2 sides. Its 2 hands on its 2 buttocks. Its mouth is closed. Its navel is open. It eats when the mother eats and drinks when its mother drinks. It releases no excrement, lest it kill its mother. When it departs to the air of the world, that which is open is closed, and that which is closed is open. So that same exact tradition opens the Bavli Sugya. So this is the last. So this a Bavli Nida, so Masechet Nida, Tractate Nida, it deals with a lot of areas of ritual in purity, not only with regard to menstruation, but even male forms of purity as well. And this is now the end of the 3rd chapter of a Tractate Nida. And it's like the Vayikra biblical verse. The chapter in Nida is concerned with the legal implications of whether a woman has aborted a fetus or a blood clot, and would that make her impure or not. But the concluding sugya of the chapter is an aggadic cluster, meaning it's a group of aggadic traditions, which likewise deals with an array of topics related to conception, embryology, and pregnancy and birth, and much of which parallels Vayikra Rabbah. So we see it opens with this tradition, and this is language. It's really verbatim with Vayikra Rabbah 14:8. However, then moves to something different, a very famous tradition. Talks about how a candle burns over the head of the fetus, and how when a fetus is in its mother's womb, it's taught all of the Torah. This is a very famous tradition. And then only at a birth does it forget that Torah. So unlike what we saw in Vayikra Rabbah, it started with being the same, but now we saw Vayikra Rabbah, the mother's womb is like a hot oven that's going to set, would boil the fetus would fall out of if God wasn't protecting it. Here, on the contrary, God also gives light, but there's a light that lets it see from one end of the world to the other, and it learns all of the Torah. Okay, and it's described as the happiest in a person's life. And you see, it does have words and phrases that appear in Vayikra Rabbah, but for a very different purpose. Okay, it then talks about different positions of the fetus, which is the same in Vayikra Rabbah and Bavli and Bavli. Okay, so these really parallel it. You can see right here. We have 1 minute left. Okay, and so it talks about fetal positions. And then it talks about how the birth of females causes more pain than males. And then it talks about intercourse during pregnancy, the potential pitfalls, but mostly the benefits of the male semen for the mother and the gestating baby. So this is all really paralleling Vayikra Rabbah. But then it comes to something else. We have a completely unique Bavli tradition, and this will end, which takes a total shift. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Shlosha Shutvim Yesh Ba'adam. There are 3 partners in a man, in a human, I should say. This is a tradition many of you might have heard in the past. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'avi V'imo, God, his father, and mother. And now it goes into details of how they are a partner, and how they physically each contribute, and then we'll end. Sorry. Aviv Mazriya Haloven. The father seeds the white. שממנו עצמו בגדים וסר פנים ומוח שבראשי פרניים מוח שבראשו ולא בין שבעין. So the father gives the white, meaning the semen, and that causes all the white things. Bones, sinews, nails, brain in his head, and the white in his eyes. But imo mizarat odem, mother, she seeds the red stuff. Shemenu or we get, flesh, basar, sarot, shachor, shaba'ayin. So we see already, we saw a parallels, but the Bavli having such a different description of gestation and conception we saw in Vayikra. And again, the Bavli said women are not obligated in Ruvu, and yet when it talks about the actual process, it sees women as an equal, a partner in the creation, or a partner. Man and women, they each give different parts. And this, I'll just say really fast, this seems to reflect very nicely Aristotle's two-seed theory. What's his two-seed theory? That men give white seed in the form of semen, and women give a menstrual blood, which is their red seed. So the red and the white, this seems to be reflecting something akin to that. And I will leave it on that. Next time I will finish this up, and then we'll talk about Torah study as well. But what's very cool is that, like the previous section, the previous passage we learned about the command to procreate, and we saw how it formed a chiastic structure around the Eretz Yisrael traditions. This Sugya does that too, and it's really cool. So I'm excited to show you that next week. Sorry we went over. Yes.
You mentioned a few times you mentioned that you were writing about this, have you written articles? Can you send us more material?
Oh, absolutely. I've written an article on this, and all of this that we're doing is the subject of an upcoming book where I'm putting the articles I've written, the new stuff together. So I'm happily the articles are available. I think this article is available on my academia page, but I will.
What's the name of it, the article?
It's from this one from Tungeon to Haven, competing theories. Let me check. Hold on.
Emily, you have to also go to a place called academia.edu.
Yes.
Is it EDU?
I have that. No, I get it. I'm surprised that they haven't sent me this yet, because
This is the name of the article. Oh, sorry, it's not forthcoming. It already was. 2019 already happened. So take out what I wrote forthcoming. But yeah.
Shana, I guess
Apparently 4 years ago.
I guess going back to the ancient Near Eastern text, and the goddess mothers, the god, I guess, I don't know. So I guess in our, transition to monotheism, to very, very strict monotheism, what happened to some of those female, the functions? Did we absorb, did we have evidence of God? I sort of see that in Tanakh every now and then.
Yes. Yeah, no, you do. And I'm not a Bible scholar, but many people have written how it's a bit more in the books of the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the way they describe God is they use the descriptions that were known, that were used about goddesses. I mean, gods too, but also goddesses, using those kind of terms.
For the most part, we kind of left the imagery and the kind of femaleness.
Well, by the imagery, I mean the jobs that they did.
I know,
like
the
powers. So we're saying, so like we're, Israelites, we have one God, and our one God does all those other, does all the job that all your gods do. Like we don't need multiple gods. Our one God can do it all. And so what is it also? It's not strange that a prophets would describe jobs that people knew and attributing it to our one God, So you think it's, Anat who does this, it's that, it's our one God who does that, you know. You think it's whatever who's in charge of the weather. No, it's our God who does that. So, but definitely already in the biblical writings. I mean, there's a lot of people who have written about this. But yeah, so that already is.
It's so, yeah. I guess the fact that even in biblical writings, those roles are not really elevated to kind of, you know, the identity of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, you know, this, we have that, but it's a kind of a very small, it's a more marginalized role there, I guess. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine, I'm kind of trying to imagine how in a monotheistic system, you know, how that, you know, how do we include both? You know, when we have a tendency to attribute, to envision God and to as male and attribute, you know, male characteristics to God for the most part, you know, there's sort of a loss. And I guess that continues maybe from what you've said, maybe into Greek, that, you know, that not continues, but that maybe, I'm speaking with no expertise, you know, but from the sources that we've looked at, that seems to be.
Yeah, no, and what's really, and what's really interesting, just to ask that a little bit, in the Greek pantheon, of course, yeah, no one has to feel need to say, I mean, it's late, but thank you so much. The goddess Pandora, I mean, she's like evil, but originally she was the earth goddess who did like good stuff, and she's turned into someone evil in the Greek pantheon. So they really, you know,
so interesting,
you know, turned a lot of the goddesses into very negative figures. And even, you know, the birth goddesses, they're like bad for women. They're the ones who cause a pain, like they're mean. So, yeah. You know, yeah, I mean, I haven't looked into, I mean, like I said, I'm not a Bible scholar. I've, you know, read how throughout Tanakh and specifically in Nevi'im and Ketuvim and prophets in the writings, there are some appropriation of the roles of goddesses. So there really is a precedent for this in biblical writings, and I think, I mean, I find the parallels to be really striking, and because there isn't anything like that from this time. Like the Greeks have birth goddesses, and this is not how they're described at all. So
it's so interesting. Can I ask a question? Emily, did you have any more questions, or can I ask a question? Oh, okay, yeah, that's fascinating. I just wondered a couple of things. Aside from who's responsible for the seed and the child, when is the conception of, you know, this is especially pertinent now where people say, oh, well, you know, when does our religion, our Judaism conceive of the fetus as a life?
Oh, that's a whole other.
Okay, you can just, okay.
I once actually gave a talk for that right before Corona. I gave a lecture,
all right, yeah.
For Trisha at Lincoln Square.
We can table that then. You've been so generous.
No, I mean,
time, so.
Yeah, I'll regular.
Has Noah.
When it leaves the mother.
Sorry?
When it breathes air, and as Rashi describes, and it becomes a nefesh chaya.
Okay, when it breathes air. And then last thing was, in the way that they're conceiving the Babylonian say, or the Mesopotamian concept of who's responsible for planting the seed and the role, and then would that affect then the laws that then govern the life of the you know how the Talmud is full of
in the Talmud, it's the opposite, because you know, this is, you know, what's so striking is that The Bavli is the one that side of the view that women are not obligated in a procreation, whereas the Strauch texts all side of the view that women are, and yet we're seeing this have nothing to do with the legal implications of it. I mean, there are physical involvement seems to be really
Or
separated.
inheritance, if the mother is not the actual
That's-
doer of the creator of the seed and all of that, then that's probably a whole nother shear. So on that, yeah, anyway.